Hello, my name is Michael Tuis, and my project looked at implementing renewable energy in the island territories of the United States. Specifically, I looked at the developed renewable energy program of the state of Hawaii and the emerging brand new renewable energy program of the territory of Puerto Rico. Now, the reason why islands are so interesting to look at for renewable energy applications is the fact that right now they are extremely dependent on oil power plants, to the point where electricity prices are almost directly correlated to the price of oil. And when you consider that these islands don't have massive natural deposits of oil underneath them, this also means that they have to import almost all their oil through massive maritime shipping routes to produce any electricity for their grid. This means that the cost of electricity for a lot of Hawaiians and Puerto Ricans are almost twice the US average, which when you consider that in modern society we use electricity for almost everything that we produce or need, that has a huge impact on the daily lives of these residents. So both governments have a huge incentive to actually reduce the cost of electricity while reducing the dependence on oil imports. And they decided to do this through renewable energy, and that's because, well, it's cheaper than fossil fuels, and you don't have to import oil because it's renewable. Now, the main technical issue that you have to deal with renewable energy is this idea called the duck curve. So that's the curve you actually see on the bottom right there. And this is basically just the idea that when you have periods of high load, such as when everyone's coming home from work and turning on their ACs and television, that's not the same time as when you have a large reduction in renewable energy, which means that your grid will actually be susceptible to brownouts and blackouts depending on how you manage it. And it's called a duck curve because, well, it looks like a duck, which is pretty fun. So, looking at the state of Hawaii specifically, they set a goal of having 100% renewable energy by 2045 and addressing some of these issues by just shooting for a really ambitious goal. And they were actually really successful. They were able to prove that through research and technical development that, yeah, you can have a grid on 100% renewable energy, which is probably the first of its kind to actually prove that you can do it. And they've been successful in the last few years of actually building up the grid to the point where 60% of it is run on renewables right now on a good sunny day. This is huge, and this is mainly because of two factors. One, they created a commission that took in vast amounts of data from different interest groups and used that to interface policies with the communities to actually build out these energy programs with the utility company. The other is, well, residents took it into their own hands. Since electricity prices were so high, they installed their own solar panels on their roofs. But this actually created a new issue that no one really expected. And that was the fact that as people were installing these solar panels on their roofs, more and more of them were no longer dependent on the electrical grid, which means that they didn't pay the utility company any money for electricity. Now, the utility company, which is now spending a lot of money on building out renewable energy projects and is now losing money from rooftop solar, this means that their expenditure went up massively, which caused this government backlash to saying, well, we're going to stop some of these local programs that are having the utility company lose customers, which caused more local backlash to the actual government's policies, which means that in some areas, support for these renewable energy projects are extremely low and has created a vast number of different issues. And this is kind of demonstrated by a very complex stakeholder grid. Now, since the program is very well developed, there's a lot of different people with a lot of different interests going on, but I want to focus on two right now. The Public Utility Commission, or PUC, and the Board of Land and Natural Resources. So the Public Utility Commission is basically the main commission that's driving this renewable energy push. They are the ones taking in all that data from the DOE, NREL, Consumer Advocate, Rocky Mountain Institute, and basically telling the state of Hawaii, hey, here's how you build out this good system for actually making renewable energy happen in Hawaii. Now, a lot of their actions are actually reprimanded by the Board of Land and Natural Resources, because the Board of Land and Natural Resources has the final say of how the land in Hawaii is used. And they often defer to local interests, such as, let's say a resident doesn't want a windmill being built near their house, they will actually usually defer to that. So this means that it's crucially important for the PUC to make sure that they are talking to local communities where these energy parks are being built in order to actually get approval to build them out, which is, something that they weren't expecting to have to deal with. Now, Hawaii's system is very well developed. Puerto Rico's is about the opposite. So Puerto Rico is a brand new program with a lot of challenges already inherent in the program. So a lot of the information I'm going to present to you comes directly from a primary source. Ricardo Santoni in that picture is a recently graduated electrical engineer from the University of Puerto Rico, and he's the one I talked to about a lot of these problems. He specializes in these kind of grid applications. So he is probably one of the foremost sources on this right now. And one of the primary issues I gathered from my interview with him was that, well, the utility company of Puerto Rico is about to go bankrupt. In the next year or so, it is expected to go under and no longer be able to function as a company, which is pretty scary when you consider that the current situation is that the island experiences universal blackouts almost every single month. And this is because there's a vastly antiquated grid, and you have a utility company that's failing. So this has caused a lot of anxiety, and this is actually compounded by the fact that the Jones Act, which is a federal policy set by the United States, forces Puerto Rico to import every single shipment from the United States, which means that oil and other essential goods are extremely expensive for Puerto Ricans to acquire for their day-to-day life. Now, I'd be remiss to say that there was also another huge challenge, and that was Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria basically decimated huge parts of the Puerto Rican electrical grid that is still not recovered to today. A lot of the richer communities of Puerto Rico now do have electricity, but a lot of the poorer ones are still struggling to get any sort of access to the current grid. So you have a utility company that's going bankrupt and failing, that is unable to provide electricity to its residents, and who has to rebuild an entire electrical grid system while implementing renewable energy. It's a difficult problem, which has meant that many residents have taken it in their own hands to get their own power by turning this idea of microgrids. So microgrids are this idea that you can use a collection of renewable energy products to basically power a couple hundred houses or a small community. This is basically, having a community co-op where each member spends like $5 to maintain the microgrid, and that's how they get electricity. These have been widely supported by the mainland and a lot of universities on the island, but the government has actually put in policies to stop these from developing, because through delaying tactics and kind of permits and such, they are preventing more consumers from leaving the electric company that they know is going to go belly up. So they're trying everything they can to stop these microgrids in order to keep the electric company open for a couple more months. And that means that you have a lot of people who don't have electricity and are struggling to get any sort of solution. Now, this is compounded with a lot of other government issues into these vast processes in Puerto Rico, which has vastly changed the government structure. So a lot of what I'm saying now could be changing in the next couple months. But really how this breaks down is that Puerto Rico has a less complex stakeholder group, but a group that doesn't want to act, but that is diametrically opposed. You have local communities that want these microgrids, and the actual territorial government that wants to prevent them in order to protect the utility company. This has meant that, there's actually no clear answer to this problem, because how can you support a utility company while having these diverse local groups? Well, my potential solution derives from these issues that both Hawaii and Puerto Rico are seeing. So they both are struggling to get local support while implementing renewable energy that is able to support the utility company. So what I would look at is, why fight this local support? Why fight this local enthusiasm for renewable energy that they're developing on their own? Why don't we integrate with those? So what I would propose is utility-owned microgrids. So my idea would be to say, look, these communities are building out their own grid systems on their own. Let's support that through the utility company so that those companies can actually get a share of the ownership of every single microgrid on the island. If you can get a share of every microgrid on the island, suddenly you have this revenue stream that you're no longer losing to independent ventures. And this actually also means that you can also tap into this massive amount of research grants and funding for microgrids and renewable energy technologies that from countries really around the world looking for a proving ground. That means that you actually have some more resources to actually push your renewable energy goals. And most importantly, this allows for those residents to actually choose how they want their energy to be given to them. Do they want solar panels? Do they want tidal wave power? Or do they want windmills? This will force the local companies, the local utility companies, to actually work with the local residents while making sure that they get the reliable power they need without forcing the utility companies out of business. I believe that this is one of the better solutions that we can implement right now. So overall, renewable energy is going to be the future of energy on these islands. There's no doubt about that. But we need to work with local residents to actually push that forward. So we need these microgrids. We really do. And they're probably to present the most viable option right now for this kind of renewable energy push. Now, these are my references, and thank you very much for listening.